What up, y'all? How y'all is? I'm about to go to sleep, yo. But anyway, I don't think this is gonna be a super long video. I just wanted to kind of get some things off my chest to hopefully I can sleep better. I just took some medication to sleep better, so I might get a little groggy or whatever in this video, and I only have like 20 minutes left in my video, but I just feel like I have so much going on psychically that I have to just purge these things off of my psyche, and hopefully I could deal with some things that I need to do grounded wise. Forgive me, I look a little bummy, but hey, I just got out of the shower and I'm really tired, and I just want to kind of like purge my soul, you know what I mean, type of thing. And I've been dealing with a lot of work with a particular soul, and I call him Master Yeshua. He actually is the son of another soul that I work with, and I actually met this soul through this other soul. And although I don't really have a I guess what you would say contract with this soul, I still care deeply for it. I care deeply for this soul, and I do whatever I possibly can to listen to it, to I guess what you would say, just channel for the soul, so the information that he's giving me, I can relay it to him, and hopefully it helps him in his waking state and his conscious life to make decisions that will benefit him. And it's a honor to serve this soul. Is very difficult because I feel like the frequencies are so different, but it is an honor to actually work for him. He's been very important in past lives, and has lived a life, has lived lives that is very grandiose and very significant. And so, to have a soul like this come to me is very humbling. And it's like I said, it's an honor. It's an honor. And I feel like the soul has caused me to do some introspection within myself, because in order to serve spirit, you have to be within a certain footing yourself. You know what I mean? And so I oftentimes talk about his anima, and the anima is the subconscious feminine of a male. And so it caused me to look at my life, and to look at my animus. We're all disintegrated within this reality, and the subconscious of the opposite is held away from us. Everyone goes through this. I've often talked about how, that's why boys are given blocks and cars and stuff like that to play with, which are more left brain or masculine traits, right? Logic, rationality, that type of thing. And girls, they're given baby dolls and things like that, and kitchen sets and stuff, and toys that represent the more emotional right brain aspect. And so whenever you're doing this to a kid before the age of 7, just subtle things like this is causing them to become disintegrated with the opposite aspect of themselves. And so when you have souls like his that are so old, right, he has an epic subconscious feminine that has deteriorated. Okay. And so, I try to be very sensitive in talking about this. And even me, I always laugh at myself and my subconscious masculine as well, because on the astral plane, I'm a filthy whore. And so I've never been, I guess what you would say, squeamish about talking about this aspect of me or what have you that's deteriorated, but I know it's not because of me and my ego. And so I don't really feel bad talking about it, but it caused me to really think a little bit about my upbringing, my childhood. It caused me to think about, what has caused my attraction, to certain males, And so, the thing is that when I was growing up, my animus was very much deteriorated because there was a lot of passivity as it pertained to my father in the home. I've often talked about how my dad was a raging alcoholic, but when he was not drinking, he was a very passive man, very agreeable man, very mild-mannered. It wasn't until he was drinking that the subconscious, you know, tyrant came out. And so his masculinity came out in a more toxic way, as opposed to being more, divine and balanced. Okay. And, I started thinking to myself, well, that passivity had passed down to me. Because the male in the home is supposed to set the agenda. He's that piercing force that's supposed to create order. Okay? I can't see. I need some fucking glasses. I'm sorry, guys. But anyway, the male is supposed to create order within the home. Okay? He's supposed to be the one to actually create the structure. And the thing is that my dad never really did that. Okay. He was in the home and he was the breadwinner of the home, but there wasn't a whole lot of structure. I didn't really grow up with a whole lot of direction, I was just kind of like, kind of whimsically, like a bump on the log type of person, and I think that is why, I think it kind of gives way to my Pisces ascendant, because Pisces is very whimsical. It's not very structured. It's the opposite of Virgo. So Virgo is very structured, very much an earth sign, very grounding. And so, because I never really had a father that set an agenda and that helped me to, create an order within the home, although he was military, he was in the military, and within his space he had order, but the house was always very messy, and my mom was always a very messy woman. But he was not that balancing force, and so my mother was the more masculine one in the home compared to him. And so when I was in school, I never really I don't know, I never really had a sense of direction. And I never really had goals. Like, people are like, oh, I want to get into this college, or, I want to have this career, or, I want to get these grades, and I want to make this goal, and, this, that, and the other. And I never really had that. I had, like, teachers and stuff like that would want to put me in advanced classes, and I'd be like, oh, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, I never really had a sense of direction, and it was that passivity of my father that deteriorated my anima. Okay? Now, I'm not blaming him, but at the same time, this was the reason for my lack of what I would call identity. And so, when you look at astrology, like, the sun is your identity. It's associated with your father. Okay? And so there was a lack of identity within my own. My father had a lack of identity with as it pertained to his father. The only thing I've really heard about my grandfather is that one day he told my grandmother that he was going to the store to get a loaf of bread. And he never came back. And he had a house full of children. Okay? And so I was like, what the fuck, man? Okay, so this was the story, the only story I had, come to know or whatever about my grandfather. I was like, what the fuck is that? So he had a lack of influence from his father, and I don't feel like my dad knew how to be a dad. What were the traits of a dad? That masculinity, that divine masculinity. And because that was all bottled up subconsciously within him, it came out when he was drinking. Okay? So I feel like, my attraction to more assertive men Men that have a sense of direction, men that, are more alpha type males, is not necessarily an attraction that just comes out of the blue, but it comes from my animus, from the ideation of the father. So looking at my father and his passivity, I say, okay, dad never really, ordered structure in the home, never demanded my mother to, to listen to him as it pertained to things. He made the money, but she allocated where the money would go. She was the one who was the guiding force in the home. And so my mom had a lot to do with, what led to my abuse and stuff like that. And, she was never one that wanted me to have an identity. My mother always wanted me to be dependent upon her, even down to getting a license. I didn't get my driver's license until I was, well into college. You know what I mean? So I always wanted to be independent, but she always had to do things for me. And so that lack of independence and his lack of influence really created this attraction to men that are more assertive, okay, that have a sense of direction. And so I feel like, we need to, when we're attracted to people, we need to figure out where that comes from, reach higher taxonomies of knowledge, why and how that came to be. Because you can attract somebody, and then when you get into a relationship with that person, and knowing that person somehow is filling a lack within you, right? Or you're looking to them to fill that lack has to be fulfilled within yourself. And that person won't have that attraction to you. They won't have that pull, I should say. You'll still be attracted to them, but at least you'll know why, but it won't be such a magnetic pull. And so I believe we should look at, the ideations of our ideal parent, opposite parent, right, as it pertains to the anima or the animus, and to see what is it within this parent that you feel is flawed. And so oftentimes we can be attracted to someone that represents the ideal parent, right, compared to the parent that we had. And that's a demon. Okay? That's a demon, like this soul that I'm talking about, right? And sharing my, situation involving my animus, because he knows I'm very attracted to his dad. And, this is one of the reasons why I'm attracted to his dad, because of the passivity of my father. And so when he's looking at his partner, his twin, right, the twin that he's to meet, she is an ideation of the ideal mother. With his dad married his mother because she was the ideation of the ideal mother, the mother that he wanted. And so when the dad looks at his wife and how he mothers his children, he wanted to be mothered that exact same way. So this is what creates these oftentimes volatile relationships, or relationships that don't necessarily pan out because the motivations and not knowing why and how our attraction to these people have come to be. So, he's in a very good position, I feel, with working with the astral self and the channeling, that he's in a good position to break family curses and, generational curses and that type of thing by looking at and examining his relationship with his mother. This is his anima, the subconscious feminine. Looking at his mother and looking at what is it within his mom that he feels is a lack. And know that that is what he's going to be attracted to within a partner. And that he needs to, he really needs to figure out what he's going to do to realize those traits within himself, so it does not attract a demon, because he's due to attract a demon in his life. His dad had a past because his dad has not reached perdition, but his soul is older than his dad, and so he's a higher octave of his dad. And I can see, like what he's showing me in his timelines and stuff like that. Like, how he's despised how his dad has treated his mom in many ways. And, I can see that from a grounded, egoic standpoint. I can see that. I've tried to work, and do some healing or whatever the case is so he can have a higher understanding of why and how that came to be. But I can see, as a little boy, he's like, why would daddy do this? Why would mommy's nice, mommy's kind, mommy's nurturing, mommy's supportive, you know what I mean? Why would daddy do this? And I understand that, you know what I mean? I really truly do. And I see the pain and the suffering. But on the astral plane, he is a higher octave of his father. And so when I'm channeling him and I'm, interacting with him, he is really beating my ass. Okay? He is beating my ass. And he is a very authoritative, very, what he would consider to be worse than his father. Okay? So this is the reason why he chose his father, because his father is a representation of who he is. And so although the father, he and the father are not, like they're not soulmates per se, right? They're twins. And so the presence of the father keeps him at a certain level because that's who he is. He's the father when he goes to sleep at night. Like if he were to take his ascension right now, he'd be like, who the fuck is that? That's him. He is his father, a higher octave of it. So, I feel like there's a strong Oedipus complex as well between him and the mom. The Oedipus complex about wanting to kill the dad to be with the mother. And so I feel like because of the strain of the relationship with the mom and the dad, there is this element of wanting, there's everything but a sexual element, if you will, to the relationship with the mother. Compensating for what the dad, is not providing emotionally, mentally, or whatnot. And he and his mom are royals. They come from a royal lineage, and so royalty, they practice, incest throughout, history or whatnot. So I feel like in past lives, his mom has been a relative other than his mother. Okay. So I feel like she, there's an interbreeding there, if you will. But anyway, I want him to know that, I will talk a little bit more about how I feel like he can integrate his anima so that his twin, the woman that he is to attract, will not have such a magnetic pull on him that she can destroy him, but that he will be able to integrate these aspects of her that he's attracted to. So it will be a demon that will pop off. It'll pop off of his timeline. And so he doesn't have to go down that timeline, and he can create his own timeline. He can truly be God in this lifetime, and to really truly rise above, his, where we have failed, where his parents have failed. He sees the relationship with his parents, and so his relationship with his twin is supposed to end extremely horribly. He can break that cycle. He can be the one to really truly just make everything better, and truly wear that purple crown that he wears on the astral plane. Okay. So, I don't really have very much time left, whatever, on my phone, but, I wanted to put that out there and kind of put, my mind at ease, and, put him at ease about, what's going on. It's an honor to work for him. But at the same time, it is a labor of love, and so I want him to, really examine the ideal mother. Look at the lacks within his mom, that he feels that there are lacks within his mother. Mom could be more like this, more like that, do this, do that, and that's the twin, and that's how he will recognize the demon that's to come into his life, And when he looks at the ideal aspects of a mother, that he should try to find ways to realize that within himself. Okay? All right, guys. So hopefully this will help me to kind of get things off my chest a little bit. But I'll be coming back to really talk a little bit more about this and how I feel like, you know, we can integrate these aspects within ourselves so we're not attracting people unconsciously but attracting them consciously. All right.